from a booming billion-dollar business to bankruptcy. Germany's financial tech giant is accused of massive fraud. Now it's collapsed and Parliament wants to know why and how much their own government knew. I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is the Wirecard scandal. It may not be a household name, but Wirecard was a rising star in the financial world and had become one of Germany's biggest companies. Now it's a national disgrace. Once Europe's largest financial tech firm, today it's insolvent and under investigation. The payment processing company is accused of one of the greatest frauds in recent history. No one is able to account for $2 billion, which may have never existed. But what makes this scandal even more dramatic is that German officials may have ignored the firm's illegal practices. Adam Platz has more.
It's Germany's biggest corporate scandal since the war. Payment processing company Wirecard filed for insolvency in June after admitting its books were inflated by more than $2 billion. Founded in Munich in 1999, the bulk of its early business was in managing payments for online pornography and gambling companies. 20 years later, it was Europe's largest fintech company, listed on Germany's DAX index with a market capitalization of $28 billion.
Ein solcher Skandal wie bei Wirecard muss ein Weckruf sein, dass wir mehr Aufsicht über und Kontrolle für die Finanzmärkte brauchen, als wir sie heute haben.
It was reporting by the Financial Times beginning in 2015 that raised a red flag. Its investigations eventually uncovered non-existent or vastly overvalued partner firms. Wirecard sued the newspaper, saying their journalists were conspiring with short sellers. And German regulatory authorities sided with Wirecard, placing a 2-month ban on short selling its stock because of its importance to the economy. That left a dent in Germany's reputation as a financial center. The once revered CEO, Markus Braun, is under arrest. And to add intrigue to scandal, Chief Operating Officer Jan Marszalek is on the run, with some reports suggesting he's in Moscow under the protection of the Russian Secret Service. So, did Wirecard's facade, as one of the few European fintech companies that could rival Silicon Valley, leave German authorities too eager to protect their star? Adam Platz, The Newsmakers.
To discuss this, I am joined now from Houston by finance professor Patrick Boyle. He's a founding partner of the private equity firm Palomar Capital Management and has also authored several books on corporate finance. Andrew Bulkeley is a business reporter at the Berliner Zeitung newspaper and was previously with Bloomberg. And Jan Bouwens is a professor of accounting at the University of Amsterdam. He wrote a letter to the Financial Times defending auditors in the wake of the Wirecard scandal. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Patrick, that's quite a story. Wirecard has gone from rising star to national disgrace in what turned out to be Germany's biggest corporate fraud in recent history. Wirecard has filed for insolvency in June after revealing that almost 2 billion euros on its balance sheet did not exist. That's quite a story, especially from a country that prides itself on rules and regulation, doesn't it?
It really is. It's quite an amazing story, yes.
An amazing story indeed. And what's even more amazing is that the German parliament now has decided to open a formal inquiry into this, Andrew, because clearly the German government has not been forthcoming with the information needed to uncover what went wrong.
I don't know if you can say that they haven't been forthcoming with the information. There's politics here in Germany too, and we're coming up on an election year, so the opposition is very eager to get the current government to put them in a bad light. They've called this committee. They want to investigate it. They want to ask some questions. But really, this is fraud. It wasn't the German government trying to defraud people. It wasn't the German government trying to hide things from people. It was a conspiracy amongst a number of very intelligent criminals hiding their accounting behind an international network.
But Andrew, could this fraud, which of course first and foremost the responsibility lies with Wirecard founders, but could this fraud have existed and executed as it did without the aiding and abetting of high officials within the German government?
I don't think you can't say that the German government was actively involved in hiding anything. There's some evidence that some whistleblowers brought the evidence to the German government, said as early as 2015, just like the FT covered it in 2015, said, look, maybe you should take a bigger look at this. And I'm sure that the government officials called up Wirecard's auditors, who were supposed to be independent and verify this stuff. And the auditors said, no, these accounts look okay to us. So the government said, well, everybody's out there making money. The Frankfurt Exchange is going to add Wirecard to the DAX, so it looks above board at this moment. What I think this committee and this investigation is going to look at is, should the government have become more active at that point? Should they have doubted what the auditors were telling them? Should they have made a few phone calls to a bank in the Philippines where this money was supposedly kept? That's the question that's going to be asked and where we're going to have to find out. But I think saying that there were some government officials helping Wirecard, I think that's going too far.
Well, if we look at the figures, though, at the end of the day, Chancellor Merkel did lobby on behalf of Wirecard in China in 2019. And all the questions, of course, point towards how could this happen? How could such a fraud, such a massive fraud take place in a country that prides itself on rules and regulations? Why did the government miss this one?
Well, it's a misunderstanding to assume that with rules and regulation, you can prevent fraud. In any case where you put regulation in place, people have to live up to that in the first place. So then I refer to firm management. And secondly, of course, once these procedures are in place, the firm needs to be checked up on living up to this regulation or not. And as was already referred to, it seems to be the case that these managers are actually very smart criminals who were able to hide their workings very well. And as a consequence, right, even the auditor did not find out, about the fraud that was taking place, as it were, under their eyes.
Yeah, Jan, Patrick, some people say that part of the reason why the German government failed to uncover this scandal is because the desire for a homegrown technology leader and champion was so large that some may have looked the other way willingly.
I think that's an issue, and I also think it's just a huge regulatory failure. When you look at what happened, the FT have been reporting on this since 2015, and the German financial regulator's response was to investigate the FT and to ban short selling. And in addition, when you look at the news that employees of BaFin, the German regulator, were actually trading stock in Wirecard, there's huge problems, huge conflicts of interest, and it's a disgrace, and it really calls into question the quality of German regulation. Even this morning, Felix Huffield of BaFin has rejected calls to resign, basically trying to pass the buck on to EY, the auditors.
BaFin, of course, being the financial market watchdog, which is being overseen by the German finance ministry. And you're saying the oversight system certainly needs some improvement. Interestingly enough, Andrew, even the Deutsche Börse, the German stock exchange, included Wirecard in the Germany's prestigious DAX index as recent as 2018. So we just heard from Patrick that the red flags were already there since 2015. Yet here we are, Wirecard being in a sense, supported by the German financial establishment.
I feel like you're trying to go for this active conspiracy on the part of the German government. At the time, in 2015,
no conspiracy, just trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I think you have to think like in 2015, Germany was very hungry to have a tech giant. It's kind of embarrassing that they've got these industrial giants, Siemens and car makers. They're famous all over the world, but they don't really have a tech giant. I mean, SAP is huge, but there's very few people that even know it exists, let alone what they do. So they wanted a big, sexy tech company, and Wirecard looked like it. And if you go back to 2015, attacking Wirecard would seem like attacking Amazon. It would just seem like improbable, and everything on the face of it, on the surface of it, looked okay. So I agree that it gets a little sketchy when the German government starts criminal proceedings against two FT journalists about market manipulation. That's kind of a weird thing. That also might be a quirk of the German legal system, that anybody can start legal proceedings. But I think that tells you how strong the belief was on this side in Germany that Wirecard was a good company. And also, for several years, people have been waiting for the economy to turn down, and they've been looking for a trigger event. And people were concerned that if all of a sudden Wirecard plummets, all the funds that have stock in it are going to be dragged down with it, and that might have been the triggering event. I'm over dramatizing that right now, but that was, people were looking for this key event. So the government was also eager to prevent that happening to a company that at the time they thought was healthy.
But Andrew,
trading,
let me just ask you, you are based in Berlin, obviously, you know Germany well, and you know that the German parliament only opens formal inquiry to investigate further this matter if the information provided by the German government is not satisfactory.
well, the answers that the current reigning government, the governing government, is not giving to the opposition. They're not happy with the answers they're giving. And they're trying to get Olaf Scholz, the finance minister, to say that he is hiding something. And at some point, you know that the opposition is going to open this committee. So you stop giving information because you're going to have to give it in the future anyway. So there's a certain amount of politicking going on right now with this.
There's certainly some politicking going on, Jan, because Germany is facing a general election next year. We all know Chancellor Merkel has already announced that she will not seek re-election. Could this still tarnish her image? Could this still tarnish her reputation?
I don't think that everything that we need to know about what happened in the firm and what was actually in the end the role of management, the role of government, the role of the regulator, right? That will not be found out before that the elections occur. So it's very unlikely that this is going to tarnish anyhow her reputation or the reputation of the CDU at large. So I don't think that is going to touch upon her.
Then if you think it's not dangerous to Merkel or the CDU, do you think there's some danger for Olaf Scholz, whom Andrew has already mentioned, who's now the finance minister and who will be the candidate for chancellor for the Social Democrats next year?
But I mean, what needs to happen is an independent investigation, a real investigation in what happens, because we don't know. I mean, all we know is what was published in the Financial Times and what has come from gossip. So now we have to look into the facts and bring forward these facts. So who has done what and who has not followed up procedures as they should. We simply don't know, and we also don't know how people were forced or to what extent policies were imposed on people. These are all things that we need to find out now from a independent investigation that needs to take place.
Indeed.
And part of it will be criminal investigation, and part of it will be economic investigation into what really happened in this regard.
Patrick,
it will be developed. Sorry.
No. I mean, we talked to both about the reputation of Chancellor Merkel and Finance Minister Olaf Scholz. Do you think, Patrick, that the scandal has the potential to undermine Germany's reputation, obviously, especially for future investors seen as a country to do business with?
I think it could to a certain extent. Luckily, things stopped when they did. Wirecard was actually looking into buying Deutsche Bank, which would have been an utter disaster for Germany. And it was just the audit leading up to such a purchase that really brought out these issues. it is not good for Germany's finance sector. I think that's pretty clear.
Yeah, and Andrew made the argument, Patrick, that that there may have been some oversight, but nothing on purpose. One shouldn't read belligerent actions on the part of the German political elite here. Do you see it differently, perhaps?
No, I do agree with that. In truth, politicians have a limited involvement in this. It does show that something needs to be done to shore up BaFin and that they need to probably change their procedures. In addition, an awful lot of auditors will be looking at themselves and looking at how they're auditing companies, because this is probably a similar sort of scandal to the Enron scandal in the United States from 20 years ago. And to a certain extent, EY is a little bit scandal-ridden at the moment, and I imagine that many changes will come about because of this.
Interestingly enough, Andrew, aside from the obvious scandal here, now this is almost turning out to be a little bit of a political thriller. The former Wirecard executive Jan Marsalek is now a fugitive, reportedly in Russia, protected by Vladimir Putin. What do you know about that?
Well, it's kind of a weird thing. It's sort of odd. Like, why is this guy hiding out supposedly in Russia? We don't really know. He was supposedly in Asia. It's kind of a big mystery. And you do wonder, I think probably the place to look is that Marsalek, this Wirecard started out, as you said in the beginning report, started out as a payment processor for porno sites and betting. And then Marsalek tried to get into maybe some kind of spyware software. So he probably had some links to some secret services, some spy networks. That's where he learned these people. Whether they actually sold this software or not is open. But he's also got a bundle of money. So maybe Russia is just padding its coffers. He's just an expensive hotel guest. But it does add a weird air of intrigue to this whole thing of why are they protecting him? What does he know? I don't actually think he knows anything. I just think he has a lot of money.
Well, interesting to follow nonetheless. Jan, what do you think are some of the major lessons to be learned, not just for Germany, but any other country from this scandal, which, in fairness, could happen in any other country, no?
Actually, I'm quite pessimistic as to the extent that we learn. I mean, if you look at, the financial crisis, right, we had all kinds of procedures in place which would prevent the financial crisis from happening. And actually, the London and Frankfurt were competing with each other, actually to become the most important spot for banking and finance. And as a consequence, we also had a little problem, not only in the US but also in Europe at the time. Then we stepped up the regulation again, thinking that that is going to be helpful. What you really should consider is not so much regulation, but much more to be consistent in imposing compliance. And as soon as you let compliance go, which seems to be happening here again, right? And happened in the financial crisis as well. You're actually heading for disasters. So if there is a lesson to be learned, right, is be very strict in compliance. But every time that we start competing with each other, right, this compliance seems to be it seems to be that people then just say, well, let it go. You don't need to actually impose on compliance, which every time goes wrong. Same was true with Enron, also a lack of compliance.
Right.
And here we go again.
Patrick, now the investigation will be officially opened as early as October, perhaps even, but has the potential to obviously leapfrog and spill over next year, which will be an election year. What do you think will be the outcome of this investigation, if you had to make a prediction today?
I don't really know the political implications just because I don't really follow German politics. But
what are some of the financial implications?
Most likely. I think the financial implications will probably be a complete reform of BaFin. I think that it will be headed up by someone new, and there will possibly be a change in the rules around audit, in that auditors will possibly be required to search for fraud a little bit more.
Andrew, what's your take? What is your prediction about, as far as the outcome at the end of this process is concerned?
I think one of the things I should have brought up earlier, part of the problem with this is that BaFin wasn't sure was Wirecard a bank or is Wirecard just another tech company? So they sort of fell in this weird gray area that BaFin wasn't sure how much purview they had over the company. And so I think Patrick's right. Number one, all these BaFin employees should not have been trading Wirecard shares. They shouldn't be allowed to hold shares if they're responsible for regulating them. So I think there will be an upgrade there, that BaFin will have some new rules about share ownership among employees. And I think they'll have to update their regulations on what is a bank, what is a tech company. Financial services, fintech is huge in Germany now, and they're going to have to get a lot more modern. I think they have to get into the next era, and that might mean a new generation of regulators there. But I think the political damage will be limited.
Will be limited. So no damage. You see, no damage to the finance minister or the finance ministry per se.
I don't think so. Olaf Scholz, he's trying to go become a chancellor. His SPD only has about 16% of the population now vote-wise. So they're kind of a minor player right now. So there's not much more damage you can do to him.
Still, it begs the question, Andrew, that this is the biggest corporate fraud in recent German history. And from the outcome that you're predicting, it's a bit of a slap on the wrist. And after that, a bit of business as usual with a couple of minor scapegoats along the way. That seems a bit, I don't know, not enough for this kind of scope of scandal, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the VW scandal is much bigger. You had a company that was consciously adjusting engines to defraud people. Even when you were testing the engines, they were going to defraud you. This was a couple of guys who were really good with bookkeeping. They knew that if they hid the money in the Philippines, they could pay people in the Philippines to say that the money was there. And it seems like it might be some little adjustments at the top so that people won't be so blind to FT reporters in the future. And it's a tech company, so the valuations are tech valuations. They're I don't want to say they're artificial, but it looks like a big number to us, to you and me, 24 billion euros. But in the tech world, how long does it take Jeff Bezos to make that?
Well, these days, not that long, apparently. Jan, if we are looking at the story, and clearly we have decided to cover it because it is quite a massive story, but is it much ado about nothing at the end of the day? I mean, it is a scandal, of course, but hey, at the end of the day, fairly few ramifications and outcomes. Well, what's your prediction?
Well, I would not say that it is nothing. I mean, this is an important warning in my view, of how important enforcement is, right? So what I really hope is that, at least in Europe, we actually learn from this, that we should make enforcement by regulators totally independent of economic interest. I can see that the economic interest of this sector is very important, also to Germany. But again, it is like with the financial crisis. What we should learn from this is, make enforcement totally independent of the economic interest and economic development. Because if you don't, you get this. Because governments, regulators, they are all going to compete with each other in terms of their enforcement of their rules, their laws, and this is what you get.
Andrew, we're about to wrap up, but you are based in Berlin. You're covering this story. You know the landscape well. How much of the story is actually being reported in Germany right now? We're in the midst of a pandemic. There was a huge demonstration on the weekend in Berlin, which has taken up most of the headlines. Are people even paying much attention to the story in Germany these days?
I think they are. I actually think it gets more attention than a lot of fraud stories do because of the juicy details. Because Jan Marsalek is apparently hiding out in Russia, and only about 15% of Germans own shares. But I think pretty much every one of those Germans had at least a couple Wirecard shares. So this affected those people. So it's an intriguing story, and people who lost money want to know how much of their money they're going to get back, or they want to see some justice. So I would say it's probably number 3 on the news list right now.
Well, an intriguing story nonetheless. Patrick, Andrew, and Jan, thank you so much for your input and your insights into this Wirecard scandal. And thank you out there for watching, of course. Hope to see you again next time for a new edition of Newsmakers.